Hi, my name's Maria Lewis. I'm a screenwriter and pop culture etymologist, and I am here at ACME's Future and Other Fictions exhibition, which showcases the people, costumes, and artworks imagining bold and bright futures in popular culture. And I couldn't think of anyone I'd want to chat to about that more than two-time Academy Award winner Ruth E. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be all over the world with your work. It's nice that this is an opportunity for me.
It's incredible to see your stuff here in the Southern Hemisphere, because it's one thing to see it on screen or even on paper, but getting to see it up close in real life is another thing entirely.
That's the beauty of having these exhibitions available to people, because even for me, when we are creating costumes, we do all of this research, we add all of this story and detail to the costumes, and you know, sometimes when we see it in the movie theater, we're like, dog, you know, they didn't get a shot of the back, or they really didn't go through the beadwork. And when you put them on display and people know the film, they actually even learn more about the stories behind each one of the costumes, because, you know, costume design is storytelling.
The audiences don't see the hours, the months, the weeks, the years that you've spent, you know, finessing that story. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that kept coming up when I was reading your book, which is absolutely amazing, if people haven't acquired it, I highly recommend, but also your blog and listening to interviews with you, you were constantly stressing throughout your career, whether that was on the stage or on the screen, the importance of research and how it kept coming back to research. And I was wondering, why do you feel it's so important to know where you've come from, to know where you're going with this kind of storytelling?
Well, you know, research allows you to understand what you're looking at. And when you understand from the research what you're looking at in photos, you really learn so much more about a culture, about a people, about the why. Some items of clothing are functional. There's a reason why, you know, overalls are worn in the fields. There's a reason why tribal beading was so intricate. So when you understand what you're looking at, you can actually communicate more with your design process. There's such a connection that's from our past that we don't realize is valuable to understanding, you know, our now and our tomorrow. So I like to be inspired by the learning that comes with costume design, the learning of who people are and how they create their culture. But when we understand how they overcome adversity, or they overcame, you know, just the ability to be able to create.
It's really fascinating to me to hear you talk about inspirations, because I think for a lot of people, and especially creatives of color, the work that you've done with Spike Lee, which has been a long-running collaboration that has spanned, you know, over a dozen films, has been very inspiring to people. And you guys go way back to the 80s when he hired you to work on his second feature, School Days. I was thinking about late 80s is also, in LA specifically, is the birthplace of hip hop. It feels like this really significant moment. And I was curious, in hindsight, did it feel like that was a really important moment and a hinge point for Black culture and pop culture?
Oh, absolutely. Spike Lee was very much aware of where we were in cinema, and he wanted to put more people of color behind the camera. He didn't feel that there was enough representation. We were not seeing our community presently in other films, so we were making films that represented who we were, who we felt we were, how we dressed, how we looked, and that included pop culture ideas and you know, styles. Spike loved athletic wear. He wore, you know, Brooklyn Dodgers, you know, vintage t-shirt, Jackie Robinson. And I feel like the whole athleisure craze that we're in now is partly due to Spike Lee. You know, we looked at sports as a styling base. We knew that we were trying to do something to ascend to a better future for Black filmmakers, for independent filmmakers, for the culture. That was very much in our, you know, in our sights during that time. We didn't know how it would be received. We just felt like everybody, even all of the cast, all of the crew, everyone was on board with it because it was nuanced. You know, I would say yes, we didn't have a crystal ball and to look into 20 years in the future, but certainly there weren't a lot of filmmakers that were doing what Spike Lee was doing.
Whether it's $100 million blockbuster or a really scrappy independent feature, how critical is ingenuity when it comes to doing a lot with a little?
Well, it's always a factor. Like, what people want is your point of view, your artistic point of view. So what I learned when I came on to Black Panther, you know, I had never done a superhero film before. It had a bigger budget. I was somewhat intimidated by the fact that, you know, it was Marvel. What I quickly realized was, A, Ryan Coogler had been a fan of Spike Lee films. He'd seen Malcolm X and all of the films that he studied when he went to USC Film School. So there was that part. Then I realized that even in the process, you know, there's a big process to making these big tentpole films that have superheroes in them. It's a lot of layers to it. But when it all boils down, what people need from you is your artistic vision, and that translates to any budget. You have to have a vision for it. And then they can implement all of the technology that's involved with creating these extraordinary costumes. But when it all boils down, it's what does it look like? And that translates to any budget.
It really truly does make sense when you see like things like the sneaker game, even in Black Panther, but also in Wakanda Forever when Shuri's rocking some of the athleisure. It feels very like Spike Lee adjacent, but especially the colors and the textures and even the historical knowledge. It feels like such a visual influence in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect with a superhero film, but I think that is testament to why the work really connected with people, including people who have no connection to African culture whatsoever and are coming along to just watch a superhero movie, and then they sneakily leave with all of this meaning, which I think is really beautiful.
Well, there's color theory to the comics. It's a colorful platform. There's also color theory in Black Panther films. We have, you know, River Tribe that has a color, the green that Nakia wears. You have the Dora Milaje in their red. You have Queen Ramonda in the royal color of purple. So there's color theory. So it wasn't unfamiliar to me because Spike also wanted to bring color into his films because Black people look great in colors. So once I was paired with Ryan Coogler, he knew the color stories that we were telling and wanted me to be very clear about how to delineate not only the characters' basic wardrobe, but how to delineate them within color theory. So we do that from, you know, the very start. We understand how we're going to craft these characters within like a color story.
Traditionally, women on the comic book page, especially Black women, have been very much drawn for the male gaze. And Black Panther and Wakanda Forever specifically have so many female characters, which is absolutely one of the best things about it. Complex female characters, interesting, nuanced female characters. I was curious in terms of their costumes, how did you go about subverting and converting that? Because I mean, even Shuri's costume, for instance, the difference in her costume and the functionality compared to T'Challa's is such a fascinating example of building a costume that is not specific to just one character, but something that is unique to the personality and the story of that character's journey.
Yeah, I don't think that we will ever get away from male or female gaze. I think that everybody wants to embrace a look and, you know, feel the sensuality of the person's adornments. So to create, say, the Dora Milaje or Shuri's panther suit, you know, we're not trying to go against the female form. We're trying to honor it in ways that I think people don't realize are acceptable. So the Dora Milaje are in a uniform because they are the highest ranking female fighting force of Wakanda. They protect the king. So they need to be in a uniform that is serious, that covers vitals, that isn't a triangle top and a cheerleader skirt, that we can actually give them a uniform that circles around their body, that honors the female form, but also is a serious uniform. And I took a lot of pride in crafting that uniform, and also for Shuri's Panther suit as well. You know, she has a story there, and that's her conflict with, you know, losing T'Challa, losing her brother, and also stepping into the role of Panther. So there's this good and evil that's at play with her costume that you see represented in the silver and the gold elements of it. But at the same time, it fits her female form. And we understand that that's not a male-inspired costume. That's her costume as a woman. And also in her lab, I didn't want anything that she wore to sort of have a direction of I'm you know, female and all of that. I really just wanted it to be something that made sense for her as a 16-year-old for the first Black Panther in a lab where she had protective layers, and it was more functional than it was necessarily fashionable, even though I love the fashion of it, you know, as well. For a long time, the film industry was just looking through one lens. Now we have a lens that's much broader because we do have so many layers as women. We do have so many stories. We are mothers, we are sisters, we are protectors, we're the heads of families, we're the heads of corporations. So we have a lot of stories within this one ideal. So that was important for me to communicate. And Ryan, of course, was completely on board with, in the Panther series, that, you know, we show the diversity of women.
How did you manage with Black Panther and Wakanda Forever when you have so many inspirations and so much to draw from and so much uniqueness and specificity within African culture? How do you tackle that and find which aspects to harness when it comes to telling that story on screen through the costumes?
You know, there are thousands of cultures and tribes in Africa, and Ryan Coogler and Hannah Beekler, they did like a Bible, which they selected 12 tribes that we would be inspired by, and they assigned each one of those real life tribes to our fictitious tribes. So we had the mining tribe that mines vibranium in Wakanda, and they were inspired by the Turkana tribe and the Himba tribe. And so when I start doing my research and looking at the images, you know, there was, you know, it was very clear that we had to redirect our images so that we could train the eye to see beauty by other standards. There certainly was, you know, this shea butter, clay soil mixture that the Himba women put on their bodies and in their hair, and you see that with the mining tribe elder in Black Panther. And so we fell in love with the costume possibilities of, you know, these 12 tribes that we picked, the Zulu tribe for the royal family, and how we would combine color theory with what we knew about the tribes, and then show them as a forward-thinking nation that had vibranium and had technology and, you know, Kimoyo beads. So we couldn't leave them as their indigenous look. We had to elevate it and move it forward so that we could create these costumes that felt like the Basutu blankets, but they were used as shields with vibranium printed on one side. So that was the joy of putting it all together. We could have our base, our tribal base, and then we could elevate these stories into this greater aesthetic of Wakanda.
you were the first Black woman ever to win an Oscar for costume design twice, and you're the most nominated Academy Award person, Black women in history. And what I think is so interesting is oftentimes it's really hard to be the first person through the door. You want to have that pathway cleared for you, but I think we've already started to see progress in terms of the doors you have kicked open, even with Paul Tazwell, for instance, winning this year with Wicked and those beautiful costumes. What is something that you hope will be different for the next generation coming up after you?
Well, I already see the next generation coming up after me. They work alongside of me. I can see them forging their paths. I support a lot of new filmmakers of color and what they're doing. When I first went into Marvel and I met with Ryan Coogler, who was 31 years old, and I had already 20 years experience behind me. I knew that there was something I could offer this young filmmaker, that he wanted someone who could build a world, and that world was Wakanda. And so I just, love to see that we are making progress, that those doors that we were able to open, with whether it was with Spike Lee and people behind the camera, or it was just me having my presence being seen in the shops and the stores, where we pull costumes on studio approval. Now I go into those same offices and I see other people of color like pulling for their shows and getting written up and racing out to have their movies adorned. And I can't help but feel that I had something to do with that, and that when someone like Paul Tazwell wins on the wings of, Ruth Carter's win, we are showing that we show up as Black excellence, that when we now go into our interview spaces and we meet studio executives, we don't have to feel like we are trying to be accepted. We have entered this industry and we are winners. So the fact that we are winners gives us a leg up, and we can be more creative. We can feel the inspiration of those who have opened the doors for the next generation. So, it's wonderful to mentor at this stage.
Ruth, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your answers, and for all of your contributions to cinema.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. It's great to actually be able to share.